The mariachi band in the far corner of the country club ballroom froze mid-song, instruments dropping into silence as 47 pairs of eyes swung toward the sound of my ringing phone. The voice of a Forbes journalist carried crisply across the lavishly decorated hall, cutting straight through my grandfather's 90th birthday celebration and turning it into something far more theatrical than anyone could have expected. "We're finalizing your cover feature for next month's edition," the reporter said, unaware she had just set off a conversational explosion in the heart of the Rivera family gathering. "Our readers are captivated by your story, from launching a startup to becoming a billionaire. The Microsoft acquisition has sparked huge discussions about where artificial intelligence is headed in healthcare." Near the champagne fountain, my cousin Miguel stood frozen, his jaw unhinged like a fish struggling for air. Barely 2 minutes earlier, he had been holding an audience at the gift table, boasting about his shiny new promotion to regional sales manager, sprinkling in pointed remarks about my so-called failed career and modest way of living. "A billion-dollar exit?" my Aunt Rosa breathed, her whisper slicing through the stunned silence. I smiled at the room, aware that many of them were truly seeing me for the first time in years. "Thank you for calling, Jennifer. I'd be glad to do the interview, but I'm in the middle of celebrating my grandfather's birthday. Could we set something up for tomorrow?" "Of course, Miss Rivera. Congratulations once again on building something groundbreaking. The medical field is calling your AI diagnostic system the most significant advancement in early detection in decades." When the call ended, I tucked my phone back into my purse and surveyed the room. Faces reflected everything from bewilderment to disbelief, and maybe even a trace of respect. The relative they had dismissed as a failure for the last 5 years was suddenly revealed as a billionaire whose work was reshaping medicine. "Sophia," my grandfather said softly from a seat at the head table, his lined face brightening into the first sincere smile I'd seen from him all night. "Is it true? You sold your company for $1 billion. $1.3 billion, actually," I replied casually, sipping my sparkling water as though multi-billion-dollar transactions were standard dinner conversation. "Microsoft acquired MedAI Solutions last week. Our platform can detect cancer, cardiovascular disease, and neurological conditions from medical imaging with 96% accuracy." The explanation landed like thunder. The silence that followed carried the same weight usually reserved for natural disasters or lottery winners. Miguel, who had spent the appetizer course lecturing me about taking my career seriously and warning me to quit playing with computers, now looked like someone had just informed him that gravity no longer applied. $1.3 billion. My cousin Carmen repeated slowly, testing the words like they were part of new language. "That was the acquisition value." I clarified. "My personal share came to about $860 million after taxes and bonuses for the team. Microsoft is integrating the system into their healthcare division to make advanced diagnostics accessible worldwide." What I didn't say out loud was that this so-called windfall represented 7 relentless years of 18-hour days, endless rejections from investors who couldn't see the potential, and breakthroughs that had required me to recruit some of the sharpest AI scientists and medical specialists in the world. A vibration from my phone signaled a new text from my business manager. "Sophia, Goldman Sachs wants to discuss your next project. Also, the Mayo Clinic partnership has been confirmed. Congratulations, you're changing the world." I tilted the screen so the family could read it for themselves. "Goldman Sachs oversees my investment strategy," I explained evenly, "and the Mayo Clinic is adopting our technology to improve diagnostic accuracy in their most challenging medical cases." "Goldman Sachs," my Uncle Roberto repeated, his tone hushed and reverent, as though he had just spoken a sacred name. "They manage my post-exit investments," I clarified. "The portfolio is diversified: healthcare innovation, renewable energy, and educational ventures. The purpose isn't just to grow wealth, but of professionals carving out new legacies." What my grandfather had never pictured was that one of his granddaughters would grow into a billionaire dedicated to philanthropy. Gently resting his worn hand on my shoulder, he said softly, "Mija, tell me about your work. Really, what does this technology actually do?" For the next 20 minutes, I described it, how our AI system could examine medical scans, X-rays, MRIs, CT images, and detect warning signs of illness that human eyes might overlook. I explained how catching diseases early drastically increases survival chances, especially for cancer patients. I told him about bringing advanced diagnostics to rural hospitals that lack specialists, and about our efforts to close healthcare gaps caused by income or geography. When I finally stopped, his eyes glistened. "You're saving lives," he whispered. "We're helping doctors do it better." I corrected gently. "This doesn't replace physicians. It equips them with sharper tools to protect their patients." Across the table, Miguel, who had been uncharacteristically silent during my explanation, finally spoke. His tone was softer now, stripped of the arrogance he usually carried. "Sophia, why didn't you ever tell us? About your company, your success, everything you've been doing?" I gave a quiet laugh without humor. "Perhaps when you asked at that family reunion if I was wasting my MIT degree making video games. Or maybe at Christmas dinner, when you told me to get realistic about my career." The sting of those memories was still sharp. For years, my relatives had dismissed my work in artificial intelligence as little more than a quirky pastime, something they assumed I'd abandon when it failed to pay off, in favor of a safe, respectable career path. "But we never saw any sign you were doing well," my Aunt Rosa protested. "No designer clothes, no sports car, no mansion. You saw exactly what I allowed you to see," I replied. "I learned early that people act differently when they know you're wealthy. I wanted to know who would support me and respect my choices when they believed I was just another struggling entrepreneur." That explanation was true, but only partly. In the early years of building Medai, I had been struggling. I survived on instant noodles, slept on an air mattress, and funneled every dollar into research and development. Even once the company began generating real revenue, I kept my modest lifestyle. Not just because it was comfortable, but because I wanted my focus fixed on innovation, not indulgence. My phone buzzed again. This time the caller ID read White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I declined the call, but held up the screen so my family could see. "The President's science advisors want to talk healthcare policy," I explained. "They're exploring ways to make AI diagnostics accessible under Medicare and Medicaid." The White House. Harmon breathed, sounding as though she'd just spotted a celebrity. "Healthcare policy touches millions of lives," I said steadily. "If we can ensure advanced diagnostic tools reach everyone, regardless of their insurance or income, we can save thousands every year." Over the next hour, as the mariachi band started playing again and relatives cautiously approached me, some curious, some apologetic, the tone of the evening shifted. What began in shock and discomfort slowly turned into genuine interest. My Uncle Roberto asked insightful questions about artificial intelligence. Even Elena wanted to understand how machine learning could revolutionize medical imaging. Even Miguel, despite all his earlier smugness, began asking me about job paths and healthcare technology. As we sliced my grandfather's birthday cake, my mother's voice broke the hum of conversation. "Sophia," she said softly, "I owe you an apology. We've acted as though you needed our direction when, in reality, you were building something extraordinary. You don't need to apologize for caring," I answered gently. "What I do need is for you to believe that I can make sound choices for my own life and career." Her eyes moved around the room, taking in cousins and uncles animatedly debating artificial intelligence, medical breakthroughs, and social change. "We can see that now," she admitted. "You've accomplished more than any of us ever imagined." Later, as the celebration drew to a close, my grandfather asked for a private word. We stepped onto the terrace, where the city below glittered like a scattering of stars on earth. "Sophia," he said quietly, "when I arrived in this country 70 years ago, I had nothing but determination and faith. I worked long days in factories, saved every coin, and dreamed that my children and grandchildren would have the chances I never did. You've given us those chances. But I never imagined that one of my granddaughters would become so successful she could change the world." His weathered face softened into pride. "You've honored our sacrifices by creating something that will help people for generations." His words meant more than any headline or industry award ever could. "The money is wonderful," he added, "but what makes me proudest is that you're using it to serve others." That is what true wealth means. The ability to improve lives of people you may never even meet. 6 months later, the entire family gathered again, this time at Stanford, for the ribbon cutting of the Rivera Center for AI Medical Diagnostics. Miguel, now reinvented as a healthcare technology sales rep, proudly introduced me to colleagues as my brilliant cousin who's transforming medicine. Carmen had launched a scholarship fund for young women in STEM, supported through my foundation. But my greatest satisfaction didn't come from their newfound respect, nor from Microsoft's successful rollout of our platform. The real victory was knowing our AI system was already working inside hospitals nationwide, identifying diseases earlier and saving lives that might otherwise have been lost. The very first patient whose life was spared was a 7-year-old girl in rural Montana. Her local hospital used our AI to detect a brain tumor invisible to standard imaging. She received immediate treatment and went on to make a full recovery. That was the kind of validation no magazine cover or family acknowledgement could ever match. What mattered most was knowing the work itself had meaning, that the years of sacrifice were worthwhile, and that I had built something that would continue saving lives long after the parties and headlines faded. At my grandfather's 91st birthday the following year, the atmosphere was completely different. There were no gasps of disbelief or awkward silences. Instead, relatives shared updates on the Rivera Center's progress, asked about my next venture, and told stories about patients whose lives had been changed by our tools. Miguel even raised a glass for a toast, speaking about family pride and the importance of supporting each other's dreams, even when we don't yet understand them. It was no longer the same family that had once dismissed my work as a pointless hobby, not because money had reshaped their values,